My question is to the Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Deputy Prime Minister said that a net zero by 2050 target couldn't be legislated because of the impact on Australia if the target wasn't met. Doesn't this show this is another announcement the Prime Minister has no intention of delivering?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, on the same basis that Australia made its commitment to Kyoto, the same basis that we've made our commitment to Paris, Mr Speaker, is the same basis we would take anything forward at Glasgow. And the proof of our record, Mr Speaker, is we have met Kyoto 1, we have met Kyoto 2, we are going to meet Paris 2030 and in fact beat Paris 2030. Mr Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition can confuse the processes that he wishes to engage in as having some material impact on what the outcome will be. Australians understand outcomes, and the outcomes are that under our government, emissions are falling. They're falling, Mr Speaker. They're coming down. Emissions have fallen by 20% and more, Mr Speaker, on 2005 levels. They're lower, Mr Speaker. And that's not the only thing that's lower. Unemployment's lower, Mr Speaker. Youth unemployment's lower, Mr Speaker. The level of investment in this country is greater, Mr Speaker. There are more Australians working in manufacturing today, Mr Speaker. And there were less under the Labor Party when they were in power, Mr Speaker. We've got major big resources projects happening all around the country, Mr Speaker. We are seeing our LNG industry go from strength to strength, being world-leading. And at the same time, our policies are reducing emissions. Mr Speaker, outcomes count, not broad rhetorical statements from politicians, Mr Speaker. Outcomes count. Outcomes count. And so let me remind the House of a few outcomes. 20% reduction in emissions, 69.2% of Australians aged over 16 vaccinated, the lowest rate of fatality for COVID, Mr Speaker, of almost any country in the world, the lowest unemployment rate in more than a decade, Mr Speaker. They're the results that the Labor Party don't want to speak about.
Can resume his seat. Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? The member for Curtin.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Defence Industry and Minister for Science and Technology. Will the Minister outline to the House how the Morrison government's investment in our defence industry is creating jobs and supporting our economic recovery as we come back from the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Minister for Defence Industry and Minister for Science and Technology.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for Curtin for her question and acknowledge and thank her for her passion and interest in defence industry, particularly in our home state of Western Australia. Mr Speaker, our government's $270 billion investment in our defence capabilities is not only delivering the essential equipment that our men and women in uniform require for the safety and security of our country. As important as that is, Mr Speaker, it is also creating and supporting thousands of Australian jobs in the cities and right across the Australia's regions. And it's also supporting our economic recovery as we bounce back from COVID-19, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, our government is investing $210 million to overhaul the health facilities for our troops in our Defence Force. At RAF Base Townsville in Queensland, in Puckapunyal in Victoria, in Campbell Barracks in Western Australia, and across more than a dozen locations as we build and we upgrade those incredibly critically important healthcare facilities for our men and women in uniform. And this is truly a national endeavour, Mr Speaker, as this project will deliver health services to 35,000 ADF personnel. And as well as that, it will support some 6,000 local jobs within the construction project. Mr Speaker, on average, across these projects, 92% of work has gone to local businesses, and in many cases, the targets for local involvement has actually been exceeded. And I saw this work firsthand only recently when I visited RAF Base Pearce with the Honourable Simon Birmingham, where we had an opportunity to look at the new health facilities at Pearce. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank those health professionals that we met for the very good service that they provided and the tour, and just to thank them for looking after the health of our ADF personnel. Mr Speaker, as we heard from the Minister for Defence today, the Australian defence industry should also be gearing up for the opportunities that AUKUS will offer. The delivery of nuclear-powered submarines will require our Australian industry to be involved to help us build and to sustain those nuclear submarines. But a closer partnership with Mr Speaker with respect to the US and the UK will also mean opportunities beyond shipbuilding. And I refer to our government's investment of $100 billion over the next 20 years on our sovereign-guided weapons enterprise. And our Australian small and medium-sized businesses are going to be critical for the success of that important enterprise. Mr Speaker, we are not slowing down. We are backing our Australian defence industries in the bush and in the city for the defence of our nation.